Good evening, black people and all allies fighting for black liberation, black prosperity, and black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. It's decision day in Atlanta. Polls closed exactly 2 hours ago, and we're now waiting to find out who will be the next mayor of one of the nation's fastest growing cities. The early tally shows that Councilman Andre Dickens in the lead with about 60% of the vote, and City Council President Felicia with 40%. But that's with only about 29,000 votes counted so far. It's unclear how many precincts remain to be counted, but in the race in November, over 96,000 votes were cast for mayor. We're going to keep an eye on those numbers throughout the show and let you know when we get more results. The race pitted Moore against Dickens after neither received 50% of the vote in the general election earlier this month. And Dickens surprised many by finishing ahead of former Mayor Kasim Reed to make it to the runoff. Although Moore finished with 41% of the vote in the general election, polls showed a very tight race between her and Dickens in the days leading up to today's runoff. Policing, affordable housing, and whether the wealthy Buckhead community will remain part of the city were just some of the issues for voters. Moore also told me yesterday on this show that a rumor circulated by rapper T.I. that she would shut down the city strip club if elected was 100% false. But did that odd claim have an impact? Joining me now to discuss is writer at the Atlanta Objective and contributor at the Intercept, George Chidi. George, Moore won, she was ahead in the general election, 41%, got 41% of the vote. But it feels like all the wind and energy in the runoff was under Dickens' wing. What did you make of that?
So I saw a bunch of people people I respect, who are politically minded, start to line up for Dickens almost immediately after the runoff was declared. I think a lot of that has to do with Dickens' sort of appeal to folks who want a smooth functioning city government. He's a Georgia Tech grad. He's viewed as just a very, very smart man. A friend of mine would describe him as would be the smartest mayor Atlanta's ever had. Thing is, I was expecting, and I'm still expecting, a very close race. And the initial results right now are kind of surprising. Dickens looks, at least for the moment, like he's running away from it. Personally, I don't think all of Buckhead's been counted yet. And that's because Moore has been a retail politician, I would argue the best retail politician in the city for 4 or 5 years at least, and through most of the 20 years she's been in office. There's a dynamic in Atlanta politics that is playing out here. There's an affluent white group of voters in Buckhead who tend to pick one candidate and the rest of the city tends to pick another. And because of the way the folks in the middle split, usually you have a very, very close race. I'm still expecting that, but right now it looks like Dickens may end up with the largest margin we've seen in 30 years.
Let's talk about the Buckhead region, white voters and black voters, and how they split. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll found that Dickens was leading among women, Democrats, black voters, while Moore was ahead with white voters, Republicans, and people ages 18 to 29. What do you make of that split?
Well, think about that. Republican voters and people between 18 and 29. I mean, those are strange bedfellows under most circumstances. Certainly in Atlanta, the Buckhead. So
are they really though? Are they really strange bedfellows? I mean, I was very curious about this idea of how gentrification was overlapping with this. With this kind of breakout, do you think that's not a factor there?
I think there's an element of that. I think some of it is because Moore has been perceived as a very, very progressive political figure, in part because she's perfectly willing to buck the orthodoxy of the city's long-standing power structure when necessary. And that appeals to a lot of younger voters who think basically the city's government is garbage and want everybody thrown out. Of course, I just described a bunch of Republicans too who think the city government is garbage and want everybody thrown out. The dynamic here is Felicia Moore was going to run regardless of whatever Keisha Lance Bottoms, the current mayor, decided to do. She had already declared. And Buckhead does not like Keisha Lance Bottoms. And so they lined up for Moore, and Moore ended up capturing a majority of Buckhead and a majority of white voters in a city that's about 40% white. The question is how much of that translated into a runoff where the runoff wasn't against either Keisha Lance Bottoms or Kasim Reed. And Kasim Reed is the unspoken story of the night, the fact that he missed making this runoff by something like 1,000 votes on 100,000 votes cast, speaks to where this electorate is. They are not interested in seeing the old school power structure survive.
Also, Dickens was able to line up a lot of endorsements, both from politicians and celebrities and activists in the city. That was just not her story, not the story of her campaign. What do you make of that differential?
So I think some of that might have been Kasim Reed playing spoiler, trying to hurt the person who hurt him. Some of that is, and you alluded to this, the sort of strip club politics in Atlanta, which cannot be ignored. Strip club, I mean, it sounds like all politics is local. You know what I mean? Like some things matter. In Atlanta, strip clubs are actually really important. It's not, it's more than just people spending money in a strip club. It ties to trap music, and the cultural phenomenon of rap in Atlanta is intimately tied to the strip club culture in Atlanta. And so if it looks like you're threatening that, you're not just threatening strippers, you're threatening every wannabe rapper in the city. And there's bound to be a reaction against that, particularly amongst African American voters. I think we may be seeing some of that.
So I just want to update now that we have new numbers from the New York Times, which has, with 45,021 votes being reported, Dickens is still ahead, 61.6%. Felicia Moore at 38.4%.
Yeah.
If you go by last election, that's about half of the votes that were cast in the general election. What do you make of Dickens still holding this lead? And can Moore, regardless of what precincts are still out, will she have enough time to space to make this up?
This is a remarkable result, unless basically all of the uncounted votes are in Buckhead. She's not going to close that gap. I'm expecting turnout in about the 80,000 range. That would be typical historically. I don't think she's got that number of votes left out there. We'll find out in a minute. The Fulton County has been much better at counting this stuff over the last year than they had been historically. But yeah, I think Dickens has got it. I would declare on those results.
What do you think the role? I mean, both of these are black candidates, but even race, colorism came up as an issue in this race.
Yeah.
Moore on the show last night basically said that the rumors about her, the things that are not true, were designed to separate her from black voters because she also had white voters who supported her. What role do you think that played? What role do you think gender plays? Any of that plays into what we're seeing tonight in these results?
So let's start with this. The colorism and this question of who white people like is an old political story in Atlanta. It's a minimum eight election cycle phenomenon. And it's come up. I'm trying to think of an election where it didn't come up in the mayoral election. Shirley Franklin had to deal with it. Shirley Franklin's predecessor, Campbell, famously got into it with his opponent. Campbell was the quote black candidate. They were both black. But the fellow who was running from Buckhead, he wasn't running from Buckhead, but he represented Buckhead as part of his ward, was accused of soliciting Ku Klux Klan support in the middle of that race, which was absurd. It was absurd. But there's a long-standing tradition of the candidate who's looking to represent South Atlanta making accusations like that, and vice versa, I might add. Part of so one of the issues that's on the table right now, very important. Buckhead is, some people in Buckhead are considering splitting away from the city of Atlanta. And one of the reasons why is that they don't believe that they have full representation in City Hall. In 7 tries, the candidate that Buckhead has preferred has lost, and often by razor thin margins. We're talking 700 votes on 80 or 90,000 votes cast. Razor thin margins. Kasim Reed beat his opponent by 730 votes, and then Felicia Moore, I'm not Felicia Moore, Keisha Lance Bottoms went on to beat that same opponent by almost exactly the same margin. It's this long frustration within the Buckhead community, right, that they just don't think that they're being heard. And I think this is part of that dynamic.
George Chidi, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm just going to update us one more time. These results are from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with 47,970 votes in. Dickens still has a lead of 62% to Felicia Moore's 38%. Thank you so much, George Chidi, for joining us tonight.